Hello and welcome to the Association for Coaching podcast. My name's Darren Robson and I'm your host for this health and wellbeing series. On today's call, I'm really pleased to have Hilary McLellan and Dr. Ashleigh McLellan, who are going to be sharing with us all sorts of different things about how we can calm and train the mind with a boost of nature. And they're also going to introduce us to their virtual mind trainer. So Hilary and Ashleigh, welcome to the AC podcast.
Thank you very much, Darren.
Hi, thanks for having us.
So, Hilary, if we start with you first. Hilary, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience and introduce, how you discovered the world of coaching and some of your professional background?
Yeah, sure, Darren. Be pleased to. So nowadays, and for the last 8 years or so, I've been an organisational behaviourist and an exec coach who specialises in emotional intelligence and resilience. But for many, many years before that, I worked in the profession of HR in the public and private sectors, right up to the last recession, when I spent a year leading a redundancy programme. And at the end of that redundancy programme, I had the title, The Angel of Death. And it was at that point that I thought, I may have ticked all the employment law boxes, but actually I think I'm more interested in how people feel at work, how they're motivated, how they're engaged. So that was when I went off and did a scary thing like a master's full-time in org psychology. And that's been my baby ever since. My real focus and passion in life is how we can find and be our best self in the many, many hours of work that we find ourselves delivering. So that's who I am and why I am that person.
Thanks for that, Hilary. Yeah, no, it's lovely trying to help people to discover their best self, isn't it? So, Ashleigh, and it's Dr. Ashleigh McLellan. So why don't you share a bit about yourself as well?
Yeah, so I'm a clinical psychologist. So I started my training in the NHS 20 years ago now. And the clinical psychology training is really broad across the lifespan. And I worked with people with mental health problems, and more recently was working with people with really complex trauma. And then decided to move into something a bit more preventative as well. So I still do some therapy work, but I left the NHS last year to bring one of my main passions, which is compassion-focused therapy, into an organisational setting. And that's how Hilary and I started to work together. She would talk about some of her experiences coaching execs, and I would kind of start bringing, we ended up having lots of conversations about how some of what I knew and my kind of expertise might help. My background is a very clinical one, but it is definitely moving into something a bit more, some more positive psychology and future focused for people.
So wonderful. So it sounds like over the kitchen table, you both discovered you've got a common passion. Why don't you share a bit of the story of how that discussion around how do we help people be the best they can be, and compassion and love and all those different aspects. How did that conversation evolve to actually, why don't we think about creating a business together in an online platform?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if it was the kitchen table, maybe the dining table with red wine, because Ashleigh's my stepdaughter. So we've been around each other since she was 12 years old, which is a lifetime. How did it start? Because we were both really just trundling along in our own careers. And I guess for me, in my coaching corporate world, I felt I had a thorough knowledge of behavioural change and the rudiments of how the brain works, and through emotional intelligence, how changing behavioural habits can feel very scary or anxiety provoking. I was coaching people often who were at the top of their game and feeling quite isolated. And when it comes to showing your vulnerable self, which you inevitably are going to have to do at some level or another while you're changing a behavioural habit, quite often between sessions in the kind of industries I work in, i.e. male-dominated transport industries, my coaches would often say, oh, it's just been so busy, and I totally get intellectually what you're talking about, Hill, but, haven't had time. Let's talk about it again this session. I'll have another go. And we talk about the power of becoming more mindful And generally that brought a real awkwardness, a kind of self-consciousness, and it was hard to get these guys to engage with a mindfulness practice to start them on the road of becoming more focused. Essentially, I got to a point where I felt I needed to create something that they could do between sessions, which gave them more structure to help them engage with developing that ability to pay attention, become more focused, and by doing so, create choice. And this, I went on a compassionate mind training course, which brought more conversations with Ashleigh, how people can overcome fear and the self-critic. And I think that was when we started to think, actually, our worlds aren't that different. We may see people at slightly different points on a spectrum, but actually the end point is very similar in the work we do. And Ash came up with some incredible research that really proved the difficulty people have when they have to be with quiet and thought when they're used to a very busy life.
Yeah, so I think Hilary's observation, that kind of sense of, we all know, we hear so much about how helpful mindfulness can be. And, if you can develop a mindfulness practice, it can unlock all this potential that you've got. But actually, it's really, really hard for a lot of people to just close your eyes and focus inwards. And actually, there was some really fascinating research done in 2014 by some social psychologists, Wilson and colleagues. They invited people to, they participated in being in a lab room for 15 minutes, which was quite a sparse lab room, and they were able to push a button so that they could electrocute themselves, or they could just sit in silence for 15 minutes. I don't know if you've heard this before, this research, but 67% of men and 25% of women chose to inflict pain on themselves rather than just sit there quietly and think. So actually, it kind of really backed up Hilary's observation sort of in her job that men in particular do not like to sit in silence. And a lot of mindfulness practice is about being silent and closing your eyes. And it is really difficult for people. They'd much rather electrocute themselves. And actually, if we think about the definition of mindfulness, which is paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally, it's fairly simple, but the first part of that is where we're putting our attention. And a lot of the work I do in compassion-focused therapy and compassion training and mindfulness, it is about where we put our intention. But if we think about it, it's also about leading an intentional and fulfilling life. So if you can control your attention, that means you're more able to choose what you do and how you live your life. But actually, it's a skill. So in your virtual mind trainer, what I would say is it's not simply about mindfulness. It's definitely got mindfulness aspects in it, but it is more than that. We're kind of directing your attention a bit. The other part to say about, this observation that people find it really hard is mindfulness is often advertised as being incredibly helpful, but in my clinical setting, working with people who have experienced a lot of trauma, what you notice is that people can be incredibly overwhelmed. So people might be keeping themselves really busy as a way of not turning inwards. And when you ask people to turn inwards, they can be overwhelmed by emotions or memories. Things can come up that were unbidden, that have, for protective reasons, been kind of put away in a box. So mindfulness actually can be really quite scary and can have the opposite effect of what people expect. They think it's going to make them feel more relaxed, but actually it can make them feel quite terrible or quite overwhelmed or dysregulated. I'm saying in my clinical background, and I worked in complex trauma, but actually the prevalence of trauma in the general population is really, really high. It's something like 90% of the world's population will be exposed to a traumatic event over the course of their lifetime. And that's not to say everyone's going to sort of be impacted by that because our brain can metabolize trauma. But I think it's about being aware when we're coaching and we're working with people who are functioning incredibly well. It doesn't mean there isn't trauma there. So we need to tread carefully when we use mindfulness. And that kind of led to more conversations between me and Hill in terms of how do we support these people who are struggling with mindfulness? What else could we do to help them? So that might take us on to the video bit, the Hilary's idea around nature.
What it is, yes.
Yeah, what it is.
Yeah, so go for it. Why don't you share with us about that? I've got loads of other questions, including why is it men are more likely to electrocute themselves, but we'll get back to those. Yeah, so share with us about, how those ideas then turned into what you've built, the virtual mind trainer.
I developed the idea from my own experience, what else can we do with these things? So I'd experienced trauma as a child, and I know that my go-to place to feel okay and grounded and safe would be outside. I had to be outside as a child, adolescent, right into my adulthood. That was where I needed to be to feel I would be okay. And in that sense of being okay, I could then start to access the kind of thinking ability that one might be hopeful for when you're coaching folk. So I decided that perhaps there was something in offering a product where people could access a visual as well as an audio, and the visual would be a vista of nature, the awe of nature, which I always found gave me perspective, comfort, and a kind of equal playing field in some ways. And then I'd done a bit of work for a client using virtual reality headsets as well. And it just really made me think how if you could be in this nature, like even if you were in the office, if you could put a headset on, be in a 360 environment of nature and have a relatively short 5 or 6 minute audio to help you create that space of feeling content, safe, and therefore capable, that would be just an awesome thing to do. That's where the idea came from. The journey started from there about how would we do this thing. And it was at that point I started to do some films when in the olden days we could travel. So I'd bought a 360 camera, and everywhere I went, I'd take the camera with me and scuttle up mountains and sit on beaches and sit in rain and curse dog walkers and all the rest of it while I tried to get these films. And as I created a library of films, I asked Ashleigh if she fancied playing a part in writing some scripts. So we wanted to provide a more structured stepping stone to help people feel held as they explored the opportunity of this destiny of mindfulness. Does that make sense, Ashleigh? Is that how it was?
Yeah, well, I think originally, because I wasn't involved in the sort of very beginning when you were filming, and originally you thought about taking sort of ready-made mindfulness scripts that had been done and bringing it with the visual. And the more we chatted about it, the more we thought actually we could really interweave what people are seeing in nature and help ground them in the nature and help direct their attention to aspects of the nature. So you are still starting to try and cultivate people's ability to attend and be in the moment of the nature. So you're kind of using some of the mindfulness skills, but in a way that there's a framework around it. So it makes it more supported for people and keeps them in like a window of tolerance. So when I mentioned earlier around people being overwhelmed because of either trauma memories or just, everything you've got to do, like you close your eyes, and the people that I've sort of been involved in working with in the corporate sector, it's just like there's so much to do. I haven't got time for this. I'm starting to think about my to-do list or what I've got to do for the rest of the day. But having that visual input and being through the audio asked to focus on parts of the visual input or kind of interact with it in a way that helps it it gives two anchors, really, and that's what the YVMT gives people. It felt really important to start with making these things quite short, because people do say it's really hard to find the time, and there's lots of kind of increasing evidence around micro habits making a really lasting change, lasting behavioural change. So even if we can get people to do this for just take 6 minutes out of your day and have this boost from nature, this is going to have a positive impact for you. And we'll tell you about the research that we've done on YVMT a bit later. So I started writing these quite bespoke scripts, helping people to pay attention and connect with the nature and guiding them through it. So we're essentially getting people to use the spotlight of our attention, because our attentional capacity is limited. So we're kind of guiding them to it, to places that are helpful. So essentially, I kind of thought, oh, does this sound right? We're essentially trying to manipulate your attention in a helpful way, in a way that's going to calm your physiological system and give you a positive, uplifting break from what you're doing. Because we know, if we think about it, advertisers and games market are manipulating our attention all the time in quite a negative way, in a way that, makes us feel like we're not enough and we need more stuff, or is giving us a constant hit to our dopamine, our drive systems. And none of that is that helpful for us in terms of well-being or performance at work. So what we're doing with YVMT is sort of manipulating your attention and helping you develop more awareness, more self-awareness, and some mindfulness skills. But we're helping you stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system. And what we're hoping that then helps people be able to do is to be more calm. And then through being more calm, we're more capable. So, we feel better and we perform better. And it is only 6 minutes, so it feels like it's doable. So I guess I brought my broad knowledge base of psychology. It's not just mindfulness. I'm using techniques from eye movement desensitization reprocessing, or EMDR for short, the kind of stabilization we do in EMDR, some of the sort of visualization that you do in positive psychology. A lot of compassion-focused therapy is interwoven into what I do, and that is very much about developing. In compassion-focused therapy, we talk about our compassionate self, but Hill and I like to think of it as like you being your best self. So starting to really live intentionally and live by your values and cultivate these positive qualities within you. Although it's 6 minutes, there's kind of quite a lot of threads go in there into what you hear when you're listening to the audios.
I think the piece about micro habits is really starting to come up on the various different podcasts that I'm doing. So different people talk about the importance of your daily habits. And my sister's one of the people that I interviewed, and she talked about making sure that you understand all the ingredients that make your life successful. So stick to those ingredients, and then you can get flexible, but get the basics right. That strikes me as, there's a real movement in this direction around these sort of daily habits and these micro habits. And I think that's really important. I just want to pick it up because I've never heard of compassion-focused therapy. So just in brief, Ashleigh, what is compassion-focused therapy? Because you can hear it's had a real influence on how you're both designing this platform.
Okay, so compassion-focused therapy was first written about and founded by a clinical psychologist called Paul Gilbert, and he drew on 3 main strands. So there's the evolutionary theory and evolutionary psychology, what we know from neuroscience, and the wisdom of the East, really, Buddhism, contemplative meditation, philosophies, all those kind of influences. And the kind of main aspects of it are around how we have this evolved, tricky brain with these powerful emotions. They weren't our choice and they're not our fault, but it's important to develop wisdom to reflect on how we live our lives, essentially, and how we do things for ourselves which are helpful. And he defines compassion in a particular way, which is paying attention and being aware and sensitive to pains and problem, difficulty, suffering. But then the second psychology of compassion, which is about taking action, wise action, to alleviate difficulties and prevent difficulties from happening in the future. And I think that's something Hilary and I feel really passionate about. It's kind of helping people feel less distress and less distress at work, but also preventing problems in the future. If you can work with individuals and teams and create a culture which is more compassionate and more emotionally intelligent, then you sort of getting a system change there. But it's those stepping stones to get to that change. Thinking about the emotions, and that has influenced our check-in. When we're checking in with people's emotions, we're thinking about 3 sort of primary areas of emotion around our threat detection. So we all need to detect and be sensitive to danger. So that's where sort of anger or irritation might come up. But we also have a part that needs to go out and get things, drive system to achieve. And we often find in the sort of business world, there's a lot of threat and drive. And then what might be less prevalent is the system which is about rest and digest, really, and soothing and connecting and relationships. So a much more cooperative and connected element to it. So yeah, it's kind of inevitably, I think, because I'm involved and I'm so passionate about CFT, it does influence it, but it is much broader than CFT as well.
I know Hilary a little bit anyway, so Hilary and I have known each other for a few years. So emotional intelligence is obviously having a real shape on this as well.
Yeah.
So how does your sort of interest in emotional intelligence? I'll come back to the platform in a minute, but I just thought it'd be interesting just to bring to life some of your deeper interests that are really shaping this as I'm listening to this.
Yes, Darren, you're absolutely right. So yes, a lot of how I discovered my own best self was through the work I did personally around emotional intelligence and understanding the fears that were getting in the way of me being that best self. When you're working in an environment, as my clients do, that's all around you all day, kind of triggering your threat system as well as your drive, it can be hard to find the moment where you're going to allow yourself to perhaps step back and be in that soothe or calm space because you feel you have to be triggered to be ready for all the time. I've tried and failed to do the traditional mindful work. So this for me felt like something that if somebody said to me, just on your laptop in a day's work, or you can go in that room and use a headset, or you can just have it on your phone while you make your cup of coffee with your earphones in, that I could have accessed confidentially and just for me, my own safe space for 6 minutes, that it would have allowed me to recenter some of my anxiety and go back to my work and be in that most capable space. That when we're triggered, we might enjoy some of the dopamine and adrenaline, but actually we're not going to have the space and capacity to maybe ask the next question or just be more curious rather than decide. This product that we've created would, for me, back in the years when I was in that space, have promoted, sped up a bit, got me to where I have finally found myself. But I think it would have been a quicker journey and maybe a little more comforting, because I'm finding coaching clients are now saying, oh, when you gave me that homework to do, I wasn't really sure, Hilary, but do you know what? I'm now finding my memories serving me that picture of nature when I'm under pressure, or suddenly a little phrase that Ashleigh said is starting to become a mantra. And I'd never realized how the connection with it on even just 3 times a week can suddenly start to give them a touchstone of feeling calm, even when they're in the middle of a meeting. So that's a very long reply, wasn't it? But it allows us to manage the emotions that get in our way when we're trying so hard to make them work for us rather than be a block.
Yeah, it makes a huge amount of sense. I mean, one of the things that we've been experimenting with within the Association for Coaching is instead of having an hour's meeting, we have a 50-minute meeting. So, because often there's back-to-back meetings, like in any organisation, even though we're a virtual organisation, just having that 10 minutes gives you 10 minutes to go and have a comfort break, go outside and taking a bit of fresh air or whatever it is. But actually, from what you're sharing, if organisations and people have this 10 minutes break, they've got an opportunity to quickly come onto this platform and stick their headset on like I did this morning to experience it and jump into that experience. So why don't you just bring that to life a bit for people? You know, I'm a busy executive. I've got 20 minutes gap. Yeah, what would I go and do? What would I experience? And then we'll get into some of the research that you're finding as well. But yes, bring to life the experience that you're wanting to create for people.
Well, it's new, so it's still being experimented with. But at the moment, for instance, every client that I have gets a VR headset as well as a subscription to Mind Trainer. They're asked whether it's part of their homework or just something they want to do because it starts to become one of those micro habits. They can go into the website, whether it's through the browser on the headset or on their laptop. The more they use it, the more they will create their own favourites that will be offered to them as soon as they go in. So by experimenting, they'll build up favourite audios, favourite videos, whether they want to be in South Africa, the Maldives, the Lake District or Cambridgeshire. So they can pick their favourite videos. They can decide they just want to be in nature for a bit. So they can, if they choose, just watch a video and listen to the ambient sound. They can just pick an audio and shut their eyes and just be in it. They can combine the two and experience both in a full 360 immersive through the headset or just on the screen, on the phone, iPad, laptop. And at the moment, we offer calm the mind, train the mind audios, and we are just playing with some coach audios as well, which are more practical, and the language and pitch is slightly more day-to-day. It's less therapeutic and mindful. So it gives people 3 steps in to getting to know the mindful state without feeling thrown out there into something which feels a bit unusual. So my absolute encouragement for all my clients is go play with it. Try and overcome the bit of kit helps folk feel that they're kind of doing something. They're kind of at the gym almost. We're working out, doing this thing. It's not quite as uncomfortable as sitting in your office with your eyes shut and being asked, what are you doing? Are you doing anything? The fact that you've got contact with something visually seems to help give permission to the practice, which is interesting.
I think the other thing to say that we've developed that's on this platform is this check-in ability. So you can be guided, because it can be quite overwhelming when you're presented with lots of different options of different audios. I mean, you can do it that way. So you can look at the entire library and each audio has a description of what broadly is in it and in which situations it might help. But to help guide people in, you can do a check-in as to how you're feeling, and then there is fewer suggestions given to you, so it's not quite as overwhelming as to which audios are going to help with those emotions. You always choose the scene of nature. We're not guiding you to that unless you do the just choose for me. If you want to just get in really quick and you haven't got time, you just kind of want it served up to you, that's there, that function's there. So you go in and you have your experience of watching this scene of nature and listening to the audio that's going to kind of be most helpful for the emotion that you're feeling. And then you check in at the end as well. And it feels really important to say that you don't have to feel bad to use YVMT, because actually sometimes it can be really useful to use it when you're feeling okay. Some of the emotions are sort of feeling calm and reflective and content. You're already feeling okay. And in those situations, we might be more likely to point you to some of the train your mind audios, which are about things like cultivating a sense of strength or cultivating a sense of confidence or kindness or patience. When we're in our window of tolerance is how I would use it. We're not up here and we're not kind of feeling numb. Then we might be most likely to start to really develop and cultivate these skills that are going to be helpful for us in life and in our work and with our families. I mean, The patience one, I think I wrote for myself in this context of homeschooling. And I did all this research. It was a bit of self-therapy, some of these scripts you write in them for other people, but actually a lot of it's for yourself. A bit like Hilary saying, she'd had this anchor of nature, in her sort of previous life of work. She might have gone through her journey quicker. So then you check in at the end and you see whether it's helpful or not, and you might choose to do another one. You might want to say this was a favourite one, so that next time you go in, that one is automatically given to you straight away. You don't have to go through all the check-in. You don't have to say how you feel, and you can skip that, but it can be quite helpful to help you develop self-awareness of how you're feeling and whether that has changed it and what was helpful about it.
No, wonderful. And we'll get on to some of the innovation. Hilary, I love the fact that you're coaching clients get a VR headset. We'll pick that up in a bit. That's the first time I've heard anyone as part of their coaching, you get a VR headset. It's brilliant. I absolutely love it. I'm just sitting there going, I'm a chief executive of an organisation or a director of an organisation. There I am sitting there with my VR headset, and I'm like, leave me alone. I've got my do not disturb. I'm in the zone. That's brilliant. Yeah, I love that.
I always knew they'd love it, and they do.
Yeah, I bet they do. I think that's really great. I know that you've been doing, or I believe that you've been doing some research with Ashleigh University.
Yes.
So I'd love to kind of unpick some of that, and what are some of the things that you're learning? And I think it's really important to say, like, you've literally just launched this. Like, we're doing this interview at the start of February 2020, and you have just launched this platform, which is incredible. And I feel very blessed to kind of get inside track on it as well. So it's going to evolve. It's very much at the beginning of your journey. But what's some of the lead indicators or some of the insights that you're getting from the research?
As we're both from, Ashleigh's clinical and I'm organisational, it's always been really vital to us in our professions that we do have evidence. And I think we know as coaches there's an awful lot out there in the organisational world of shop window that people can access, which doesn't really have much evidence associated with it. It often doesn't even have the validity or rigour that we would hope for from a scientific perspective. So that was a must do, and we created a beta website in the first few months in order to be able to do the research while we designed the new website, which you're quite right, was only launched last week. And the evidence only came in 4 days before that launch. So the Aston research. And for me, it's research that's our first point, and we want to now keep growing it and keep developing that. But we have had some really exciting findings, which is just beyond exciting. So Ash, now I'm going to pass it over to your brain, which is far more in line on this.
It was great to have an evidence base to talk about, because obviously me and Hilary have our experience and expertise that we're saying this is why we think this will work, but to have something that says this is how it works is quite helpful. So Aston University did a diary study for us where it was an experimental design of either just listening to the audio, having the audio and the VR headset, or having the audio and watching the nature on another device like a laptop or your phone or something. And then we also had a control group, which was just listening to me reading some things out. So what we found was that and people, there were different time points over the day. So they had the intervention a couple of hours after they started work, and then they were measured 2 hours, 4 hours and 6 hours after that. So you kind of saw the sort of longer effects that it might have. All of the interventions had a significantly positive effect on psychological energy. And what I mean by that, what the measures that were used were ego depletion. A negative effect is they were reduced. So things like I feel really drained, or I've got no mental energy left, or it's hard to stay focused, that went down. So people felt less like that. And feeling sort of irritable or nervous or jittery, that improved as well. So that went down. And then the subjective vitality and positive effect increased. So Things like I have lots of energy, I feel alert and awake, I'm looking forward to the rest of the day, feel excited, inspired, strong, alert. So it all went in this really good direction where the negatives were reduced and the positives were increased. So that was the immediate impact of the 6 minutes. And actually, the video was watching the video either on VR headset or just on a laptop was better than just audio alone. So only listening to the audios didn't have as much of a positive effect. So that was really nice and kind of confirmed maybe what we thought in terms of, I mean, there's a lot of research out there to say that watching nature, even on a screen, has a positive impact on us. But remember, this is only 6 minutes. So I was quite impressed that even in just 6 minutes, we could have this positive effect on people. And then what happened over the course of the day, one of the other nice findings in a work setting, which I think is really encouraging, is after 4 and 6 hours, so later in the day, there was an improvement in task performance. So that was things like, I did my task well, I did my job, I've completely fulfilled all my professional obligations. So taking just 6 minutes out of your day at around 10 o'clock means you're effectively more productive. We were really encouraged by that, weren't we, Hilary? And that was just watching and listening, but it didn't have to be a VR headset. It was there just on the screen. And then the other nice finding about the VR headsets, we saw a positive effect. It wasn't as significant, but it was nearing significant on the creativity measures. So actually people's creativity, it sort of unveiled itself over the course of the day. So after 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, the creative process. I think, let me give you an example of what the measures sort of were looking at. It was things like I created new ideas for improvements. I mobilised support for innovative ideas. I was thinking about the problem from different perspectives. I was searching for information from different sources. I demonstrated originality in my work. I tried out new ideas and approaches to problems. So me and Hilary were really interested in looking at creativity. From my perspective, using the right hemisphere of the brain as well as the left. So the right hemisphere of the brain, it is that kind of visual, going out in nature and space, that should help with creativity.
It's important to say it was innovation and creativity as well. So innovation was in there.
Yeah, the innovation, those both measures, innovation and creativity. And I think my sort of hypothesis about this, but the research hasn't been written up yet because it's sort of literally hot off the press. So these are like the headlines, but there's still a bit more work needs to be done. But I think that immersive experience of being in the VR headset will be having some kind of impact on these measures because it wasn't as consistent. It wasn't found as consistently when you watch the video on a screen rather than in a headset. So we're really sort of excited to share the research, but also to build on it in real work settings. So it was in people's work day. So they were working throughout the study and it was kind of taking that time out to do the measures that were used. But I think we'd really like to do some case studies with people who are like the kind of people that we would coach and work with. So I think gives a lot of face validity, doesn't it, to what we're doing. I don't know if you want to say anything about creativity.
I suppose from a coaching perspective, when you're coaching people at the top of the game, their world is very small. They find it very hard to find people who'll speak to them on a like-for-like basis. So to have an intervention as well as the coach, which our population sample didn't have a coach. So to have a coach and this intervention, plus some initial evidence to show us that can improve our ability in being innovative and creative, feels like for senior leaders and execs, that could be a huge plus to not only feel that, well, when I'm speaking to my coach, it helps me with this, that and the other, but in between time, I can access something that will be able to recapture that space I have with my coach when I'm not with my coach. And that's the kind of progression that I'm interested to explore. If you have a coach as well, do you get to your goal quicker? And how much of this intervention has a handle in that? So many questions, Darren, so much more to do.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And I don't know, I'm not asking this because I've got any insight into it, but some of the metrics that you're capturing, is there a way for the person that's using it to sort of self-evaluate, this is where I am, and then through the use of the technology, this is showing how I'm improving some of these areas, or anything like that you're going to build into it, or is that already in place?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, at the moment, because it's so new, we're still not sure what kind of data we'll capture, but that is a really interesting idea to look over time, what change might happen over time, because that's definitely one of my hypotheses. The research that we did was over a short period of time, but I think what the content of the audios would have an impact over a longer period of time, much like coaching. One session of coaching won't have as much effect as 6 sessions over a year, for example. The more kind of you're giving people that opportunity to reflect or to practice and put things into action, the better. So yeah, I might take that idea, Darren, and think about how we capture it over time and how we might measure that. I mean, it could be another study as well to look at people using it over the course of a year rather than a month, and look at some more some different measures.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just drawing on one of the other interviews, which yours will come after that. And what Tony shares, he does a mile a day, and he's done it for 11 years. And I say he's retiring. And what Tony's learned through that is actually, it's not about measuring that I'm doing it every day. It's the fact that I just do it, and it's just become the habit. And that habit has now, created a very healthy experience for him in his life and his body and everything. It's just had such a positive benefit. And you can see the same with what you were sharing earlier about micro habits, is actually if you can get this tool to, if they reinforce this, we know from neuroscience, I've seen different studies, but let's say between 45 and 120 days, Ashleigh, you might know, and Hilary, you might know the actual figures. You have to keep practicing, don't you? You have to keep repeating certain things in order for it to become a habit. And this tool and this platform that you're building actually supports and reinforces that, from what I'm hearing.
Yeah, we think so, definitely. And it makes it much more accessible, doesn't it? Because not everyone in an organisation is going to have coaching, and it could be every level of the organisation could access this. So it could have a real ripple effect on people's well-being, but also performance and leadership. We often get asked about, is this well-being or is this leadership, don't we, Hill? And we're kind of like, well, they're so interlinked, aren't they?
Yeah, I think that's the budget holders speaking, isn't it? Does it come under well-being or leadership? Who's going to pay for it? I mean, the other interesting thing is that I ran some focus groups at the end of last year with a number of senior leaders in lots of different organisations, and asked them to kind of feed back on the Calm and Train audios. And they felt that it would be good to have these more coach-like audios, which we've created 6 of now. But they gave us the subject headings of what they felt the titles should be. So we're doing it, we're creating that bit of it from the horse's mouth as well. We're listening to organisations about what they feel the challenges are and what the audio titles need to be. And that's the latest bit of development. Yeah, I mean, so far we're thrilled with how it's being received, aren't we, Ash? It's given it was just kind of a genuine, well, I know how this feels and I didn't have anything to help me, but by goodness, surely we can do something to make this better for folk. And then that was long before COVID arrived and made us all think more about nature and how we manage ourselves. And it just feels that to have the evidence, wow, it just blows my mind. Like that little idea, now we've got evidence to say, yeah, you know what, Hilary, that wasn't such a bad idea, and created something we're really proud of. No matter what happens now, we're just really proud of the work we've done.
And I think in the context of the pandemic and, people not being able to travel, and like you can literally go to a beach in the Maldives. I love going to the beach for 6 minutes. And that sort of little bit of escapism to just sort of shift the mood that you're in and your body. And Yeah, that can be really helpful. But we also had some feedback from someone who's been using it to say how actually they started to go out in nature more. So,
yes,
because we're not wanting to replace people going out in nature. This is a kind of an extra during your work day to put in there to be helpful to you. But it can help people reconnect with nature in real life as well. And that felt really nice to hear that from some of the subscribers who've been using it for longer.
Well, it makes huge sense. When I do get out running, which is not as frequently as I'd like to, but I'm often listening to podcasts. So you can see how that combines.
Yeah,
I can see and feel how this can really benefit lots of different people. I really agree. I think it's so important that you've got that clinical background and that research background. I think that's going to be so positive, because quite often in the coaching world, as we know, there's a question around the efficacy and where is the empirical data and how can you evidence it. And I think the fact that you've built that into the foundations and the principles of what you're building with the platform, I think is fantastic. I really do. And I look forward to you, being able to share more of the insights, because I think this can expand. I think whilst we're talking about an organizational context here, and I think I don't just mean corporates, I mean in that I can see our business entrepreneurs, small business owners, all sorts of teams of any size can benefit from this. I'm also very mindful of what you've just shared, Ashleigh, about your own homeschooling experience. And I've been through the same thing with 3 daughters, and just I can see how my daughters, like our children, could benefit from just mindfulness practice. And I'm seeing it from schools, but there's all sorts of applications for a platform like this, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so I think there's huge amounts of benefits. I do want to go back to the VR headset. So Hilary, come on, just that. Where did that idea that I'm just going to get a VR headset, and now I'm going to kind of give it to my clients, and now I'm going to build a product so that they can use that VR. I mean, I'm fascinated with that. That's just incredible in terms of innovation. Like, how did that happen?
Oh, God, Darren, you're the one that let the genie out of the bottle. It was meeting you that made me think I had the power to pursue my ideas. I mean, I did some training. I was asked to go in and do some training in TfL, actually, where they were using headsets to help with health and safety judgment when you're bus driving. And it was awesome. And I talked to them about emotional intelligence and decision making, when you're in charge of a huge red London bus. But the whole thing just really captured me about how it sparked conversation and immediately put these guys straight into their working day. We were in a training room, but they were in there. And even though we were only putting the headsets on and off and doing exercises, the quality of the conversation was something that you wouldn't normally get in a training room in London. And I just kept chatting to the guy who was overseeing the headsets and going, oh my God, couldn't you do loads with these? And probably drove him bonkers. I drove a number of people bonkers for some months, because I then got the camera and I then wanted to put the film onto the headset. And there were a lot of marital disputes when we were on holiday, and all I wanted to do was film, and all he wanted to do was have half a lager. So, I mean, I could write a book about what it feels like to be a bit bonkers with an idea. I just truly believed that I couldn't really understand why no one else was doing it. But no one else is. So, hey-ho, we've had to go, and we've enjoyed the ride most of the time. So that's all I can say, Darren. I just kept going, even when nobody was interested or supportive. I just kept going. I can be quite stubborn, you know that.
I think the other thing, Hill, which I don't think you've mentioned, is, the industry that you work in, that is very male dominated, actually having a piece of tech. I'm just thinking about the train drivers and signallers, to be able to have the opportunity to put this on, like, it just feels like you're doing something more than closing your eyes. And the research is saying that that's difficult for people. So let's give them a way in to helping them get to this different space, which is helpful for them, which is more supportive and gives more of a framework. So yeah, I think I remember you saying, I think men like a bit of tech, so this is going to be
a bit of tech and a bit of kit. Yeah, the job's done.
No, it's fantastic. I love it. I love it, and I love where it's sort of the spark of the idea, and you've stuck with it. And that endurance and grit and determination. You're just going to keep going with it, like a dog with a bone. I think that's brilliant.
I am a dog with a bone.
I'm sure there's a lot of innovators and sort of creatives and entrepreneurs out there that will really reflect on that and go, yeah, I know those conversations with my spouse at home. So I'm sure that sparks a few laughs.
Oh dear, that's not laughter, that's hysteria.
Yeah. So I think what you've built sounds wonderful. I say I'm looking forward to exploring it a bit more, and I think it looks really robust and for lots of good positive reasons. And I love where the genesis of the idea is between both of you. Where do you see the future for it? What's your hope and aspiration for this product that you've found yourself now building and owning and launching out into the world? What's your aspirations for it?
Oh, the thing that first comes to my mind is to just build a more compassionate world. It is that grand sometimes to, have a positive effect on people. But yeah, it probably needs something a bit more specific, which I feel like Hilary was going to be better at answering.
Well, I think Ashleigh and I both want to shape the world for the better, and we found a little way we think we can do that. But it's been there's no denying it's been a huge amount of work to date, a lot of blood, sweat and tears. It's about selling it. And making it self-sufficient. We're at the point where I think, we need to cover our overheads. We can't keep doing this. Just cover our overheads would be fine. So luckily, we've got some organisations who are already interested in it from a wellbeing point of view, but also a leadership development, people leaders point of view. And I just have great faith that it's a product that we believe in. We have evidence that it works, and we're authentic and honest about it. And we'll just keep on keeping on, basically. But come back in 6 months and see if we're still around.
I think we're never short of ideas, though, are we?
No.
In terms of how we might expand or how we might kind of integrate it into helping people get outdoors more and cooperating with some good colleagues that we've got who've helped with some of the filming and getting people into nature and doing some of the work that we do together, developing our compassion-focused coaching. Again, for this to be a stepping stone for something more, but it's really feels important that it stands alone in its own right as something which can be really helpful on an individual and a systemic level. So yeah, we're never short of ideas. But we do need to cover our overheads.
We do, yes.
It's always useful from an entrepreneurial perspective. And I've got a funny feeling that you're definitely going to be covering your overheads. And I think we can all sign up actually to the a world with more compassion. I think that's that sort of philosophy and set of principles. I think lots of us are feeling that at the moment, and I think we can all sign up to that. For those people that have enjoyed listening to this today and would love to kind of connect with you both individually and also for your organisation, where can they find out more about you? We'll be sharing some links, but share a few more. Where are your websites? How can people connect with you if they want to continue this conversation?
Well, they can read about Mind Trainer at
www.yvmtrainer.com. We've both got emails there, haven't we? Ashleigh at yvmtrainer.com and Hilary at yvmtrainer.com.
Yeah.
So the website has got links and LinkedIn. Yeah, can find us there.
It's been wonderful to spend an hour with you. And to Hilary, on a personal level, I just, having known you for the years I have, and to see what you've helped co-create here, it's wonderful. And Ashleigh, it's been really lovely to get to connect with you. So I just want to say personally, I love seeing what you're doing, and I look forward to seeing how it goes forwards. And thank you very much for your time today. I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, me too. Lovely to see you.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been great to have the opportunity to talk about it and share it. Yeah, so thanks for giving us that, and good to meet you.
Thanks ever so much, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Darren.